Washington, President Trump vowed on Wednesday that he would not talk to Kim Jong-un, cooling off what has become his on-again, off-again cultivation of North Korea's rogue dictator. But if Mr. Trump's tweet, in which he said, "Talking is not the answer," seemed to reignite tensions with North Korea, it also revealed a paradox in how Asia experts view the crisis. Some fear less that Mr. Trump is going to start a war with Mr. Kim than that he is going to stumble into a risky, unpredictable dialogue with him. The world's attention is understandably focused on Mr. Trump's saber-rattling threats against Mr. Kim, most dramatically, his promise to rain fire and fury on North Korea if Mr. Kim fired ballistic missiles at United States territory. But a meeting between Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim, these experts said, could open the door to ratifying North Korea's nuclear status or scaling back America's joint military exercises with South Korea. That could sunder American alliances with Japan and South Korea and play to the benefit of China, which has long advocated direct dialogue between Washington and Pyongyang. What the North Koreans are angling for is to bring the danger and tension to a crescendo, and then to pivot to a peace proposal, said Daniel R. Russell, who served until March as the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian Affairs. All of this is focused on pressuring the U.S. to enter direct talks with Kim on his terms. That is the big trap. Previous presidents avoided that trap, Mr. Russell said, even if Bill Clinton briefly contemplated meeting Mr. Kim's father, Kim Jong-il. But Mr. Trump brings a deal-maker's swagger to the North Korea issue that his predecessors did not. He has in the past expressed a willingness to sit across a table from the willful young scion of North Korea's ruling family. "I would speak to him," Mr. Trump said during the presidential campaign. "I would have no problem speaking to him." Last April, he said, "If it would be appropriate for me to meet with him, I would be honored to do it." While the Pentagon has drawn up options for a military strike on the North, officials conceded would be all but impossible, given the retaliation it would provoke and the calamitous casualties that would result. Stephen K. Bannon, Mr. Trump's former chief strategist, reflected that internal consensus when he told the American Prospect, "There's no military solution. Forget it." That leaves diplomacy, which Secretary of State Rex W. Tillerson and other officials have made clear is still the administration's preferred course. If North Korea curbs its behavior, Mr. Tillerson said recently, there is a pathway to some time in the early future having some dialogue. Hours after Mr. Trump ruled out talks on Twitter, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis contradicted him. "We're never out of diplomatic solutions," he told reporters. In Geneva, Robert A. Wood, the American ambassador to the Conference on Disarmament, said the United States remained open to dialogue. "We do not seek to be a threat to the Kim Jong-un regime," he said. Trying to explain Mr. Trump's tweet, Mr. Wood, who was once the State Department's acting spokesman, said, "What the president is saying is that he doesn't see talking as solving this problem, and part of the reason is that the North is not interested in dialogue." Indeed, Mr. Trump's sudden hostility to talks appeared to be less a reversal of his previous statements than an expression of frustration with Mr. Kim's continued belligerence. Days after Mr. Trump praised him for his newfound restraint, Mr. Kim lobbed a missile over Japan. For now, the Trump-Kim summit remains a far-fetched notion. Even if North Korea was interested in speaking to the United States, its string of belligerent actions, not to mention the June death of Otto F. Warmbier, the Ohio College student held for nearly 18 months in Pyongyang, would make a meeting politically untenable for Mr. Trump. In his tweet, the president declared, "The U.S. has been talking to North Korea, and paying them extortion money, for 25 years. While Mr. Trump's precise meaning was unclear, he seemed to be referring to the promises of fuel oil, nuclear power reactors, humanitarian aid and the lifting of sanctions that accompanied previous diplomatic negotiations. Mr. Trump, experts said, is correct that talks with North Korea, whether conducted by Democratic or Republican administrations, have been costly and unproductive. And with the North Koreans now capable, by some estimates, of producing an atomic bomb every 6th or 7th week, the cost of reaching any new agreement would be even higher. We're long past the point where we can fob them off with a few light water reactors, said Michael Orslin, a research fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, who argued in an essay in Political magazine this week that Mr. Trump should shun negotiations in favor of a policy of explicitly deterring and